Local productions seen on Delta College Public Media are made possible with support from viewers like you. Thank you.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Mike Redford, and this is the follow-up. Coming up on tonight's show, a deadly shooting rampage rocks the MSU campus. It has all of us a bit shaken up, particularly anyone who works on a college campus. SVSU's Keil is here with her reaction. She will also talk about the rash of unmanned flying objects being shot down, and we'll touch on the apparent war crimes being committed by Russian soldiers in the war with Ukraine. Plus, there is a child care crisis in our state, with so many parents looking for daycare options for their kids, but not enough places to put them. What about the governor's proposal to provide free preschool for all 4-year-olds? Connie Mancillas, an experienced daycare owner and operator, will join us as well with her thoughts. But first, we would like to hear from you to help drive the conversation here on the show. You can do this in a variety of ways via social media on Facebook and Twitter. You can email us, or you can dial into our follow-up hotline to voice your opinion or suggest future show topics. And if you'd like to watch any of our past shows this season, just log on to deltapublicmedia.org. Up first, a regular on the show, Keil, SVSU political science professor. Nice to see you again.
Nice to be here, Mike. Appreciate it.
Which was a little bit of a different day. It's been a sobering day.
It has been. It has been indeed, yes.
Starting with the MSU shooting last night. You work on a college campus. All of us are shaken up by it, even more so, I think, when you're on a college campus. We're on a college campus doing the show, so I know that was a big topic of discussion on the campus today. So what's your reaction to that?
Well, it's been a big topic of discussion, and also I have a number of students, were former students of mine, who are now attending either Michigan State or Michigan State's law school, and a couple friends, actually, that are there as well. So it's hit home even more so than it might otherwise. But the campus has been pretty much stricken by it. We chose not to cancel classes today, but they did decide to have a vigil ceremony. So this evening, actually right around now, they're going to be doing a vigil ceremony in the presidential courthouse, or courtyard, not courthouse, at Saginaw Valley, just so the students have a chance to get together and be together, because that's what's really critical during these times, is the need to feel like there's some security with the group that you're with. Yeah. So we'll see what happens with that. But I know a lot of my students have been very upset today. It's been difficult. Yeah,
it's going to be a few more days of just trying to come to terms with this. It can happen anywhere, and you feel very vulnerable, that's for sure.
We certainly do, yeah.
So let's change gears now. Let's talk about these rash of unmanned flying objects being shot out of the skies. And I think a lot of us are sort of not sure what to make of it, how seriously we're supposed to take it. Spy balloons, weather balloons. Heck, are they drones that have gone awry? I'm sure the government maybe know more than they are telling us.
I'm sure they do know more than they're telling us. I mean, honestly, they did shoot down the first one, the large one, the surveillance balloon that they believe is Chinese. And they've now managed to recover most of the pieces of it and are analyzing it. But I'm going to guess that's going to take weeks, months, years to actually have a full analysis of it. Yeah. So really what's going on, who knows? China's then claiming we also have had sent surveillance balloons across China. I originally thought, this is crazy. I mean, we have satellites. Why would you be using a balloon for this sort of thing? But as I looked into it, apparently they could get a lot more fine detail with a slow-moving balloon rather than a fast-moving satellite, and that there's a reason for these things to be there. So we did shoot that one down. There's been a big controversy over whether we should have shot it down earlier. Sure. Or whether we should have, waited until they could get it to the coast where it would not land on anybody. So who knows what's going to go on with that? But I mean, we certainly did do that, and now we've apparently shot down 3 more things. Right. The thing about the surveillance balloon, though, is it's at 60,000 feet, which would not be anywhere near drone area. Drones freeze; they could never be up that high. And I don't think the other 3 things could have been drones either for those same reasons. Right. Unless it's a really military-grade drone. It would be unlikely that it could be flying that high and be a drone.
Yeah, for those of us that live around here, the last one on Sunday was shot down over Lake Huron, came over to the UP, so that kind of hit a little bit close to home. And it was sort of interesting because I heard something today about, on any given week, about 1,000 weather balloons go up around the world and a couple hundred over the United States. So you have to wonder, these just weather balloons that they're just sort of mistaking for something else? I mean,
it's possible. Again, I don't think it's a drone. The biggest concern is the fact they're actually in the area where planes fly. The surveillance balloon at 60,000 feet is not where planes fly, so that wasn't an issue. But these other things are in areas where planes could fly, could cause damage to a plane if it hits it, which could then come down on people down below.
Yeah.
So that's also very concerning. And I'm sure there's a registry of these different balloons and whatever.
Right.
Maybe we need to look at that. I know some people think they're UFOs. That's the big thing this week. And the government pretty much has said that's not true.
Right.
But again, I don't know if I trust them either. So
Absolutely. Well, we're looking for more transparency, and hopefully we'll get a little more information in the days ahead.
yeah.
All right, let's switch over. Something in your wheelhouse that you really do a lot with, I know, with your classes. There's evidence of war crimes being committed, I think it's just by the Russian shoulders, against the Ukrainian people. Anything from looting of civilian property to the rape and murder of civilians. As you said, we were talking before, there has been some accountability, right?
There has been. And one thing to remember with war crimes is there are a lot of different types of war crimes, including starting an aggressive war. So Russia could be accused simply of doing that, which is what Germany was accused of during World War II. But more critical are the things that involve civilians. So if you are targeting military people, that's acceptable. That's not typically a war crime because people pledge to give up their lives for their country. So that's really different. But when you're talking about civilians, it ends up being a much bigger problem. And that has been an ongoing issue with Ukraine. And I'm sure there have been some war crimes committed by the Ukrainians as well, but I'm sure they're also quite minor compared to what's happened with Russia. There have been several attempts to actually charge people with war crimes that have been successful already, which shocked me when I saw that, because I think of Ukraine as being basically, trying to do everything to survive, let alone worry about, punishing people for committing war crimes. But there have been 4 trials so far that I could find out about that have actually convicted people. Some people have been exchanged back with Russia in return for some of the Ukrainians being returned. Several of them have been imprisoned, and so there's some efforts at accountability on the part of Ukraine, which I think is impressive for their situation.
So how do you define what constitutes a war crime? If you mistakenly hit a civilian apartment, not knowing you did that, it's collateral damage. Is that a war crime?
It's not collateral damage as much as it is. It's called the double or dual principle, which is you're trying to do something good to begin with, which is shooting a military target, and you happen to either mistake it for being a military target but civilian, or you aim at it and peripherally also damage something else next to it. And that's considered to be acceptable as long as your intent is right to begin with. But if you target something that's clearly an apartment building that has, you can see balconies with people's stuff on it, that's clearly going to be something that's not going to be a valid target. And that's what Russia has been actually targeting in most of their attacks. And that's to try to take away the morale of the Ukrainian people. Also, interestingly, they're hitting infrastructure too, and trying to take out power plants, and that's also a war crime, because people have to have power to be able to survive, particularly in Ukraine in the winter. And so since it's targeting primarily against civilians, that would be considered to be a war crime.
Right.
Whether it's going to be much accountability, who knows? There's some going on right now, but the biggest problem is the United Nations is the group that can actually hold them accountable. And Russia is on the Security Council, so they have control over what happens with that type of accountability.
We hear about The Hague. What is their sort of role in this?
Well, The Hague has 2 courts. One is the International Criminal Court, and the other one is the International Court of Justice. For the International Court of Justice, both sides have to agree to be sued, which Russia's never going to agree to do. And the International Criminal Court is only valid if both sides are actually members of the ICC, and neither one of them are members of the ICC. Some of it's being referred over to the UN anyway for the ICC because they think they may be able to get some jurisdiction with it, but it's going to be spotty at best, unfortunately, because like the United States, neither Russia nor Ukraine are members of the ICC.
When we hear these stories and we watch it every day, and we hear about these war crimes that we're talking about, there's some of us that say, okay, why is the world allowing this? The U.S. and their allies were supplying cash and weaponry to try to keep Russia at bay. There's some of us say, let's just go in there and take them out. Why are we even putting up with this?
Well, there's a simple answer to that: nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think President Putin would even blink if he thought he was going to be in danger of losing to Allied forces. He saw what happened in World War I and World War II, and he's not going to even think about not using a nuclear weapon, maybe strategically,
Right.
maybe not necessarily bombing the middle of
Sure.
Kyiv, but that threat is definitely there. And that's one of the reasons why controlling nuclear weapons worldwide is such a critical thing.
Yeah.
Because even North Korea, which has, 3, 4, maybe 5 nuclear
Sure.
weapons, that gives them so much power compared to South Korea right next to them. So
Right.
it's just difficult to just go bomb something because of that.
Right. Well, next week marks the 1 year of the Russian-Ukraine war, and Ukraine is certainly doing its best to fight them off, and hopefully it will end soon.
Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah. Thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Always good to see you.
Nice to have you, Mike. Appreciate it.
So we're going to segue now right to Connie Mancillas. Connie is a daycare owner and operator. She is dialing in remote from Saginaw County. We had her on a year ago about this time, and we thought it was a good time to have an update. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Mike.
So you and your husband have been doing this for 34 years. That's quite a
Yes, we
run.
have.
Give us an update on what's happening with your particular daycare. How many kids do you have? How many kids are you able to keep track of?
We have 17 children enrolled, but they cannot all be here at the same time. We're currently we were licensed for 12. The state of Michigan allowed daycares to do an increase in their capacity up to 14 to try and help out with the shortages of spaces available in daycares. And so we applied for that. We currently have, at the most, we have 10 children at one time. And the reason for that is that we are sort of full with infants. We've been waiting on parents to have babies, and right now our babies are slowly rolling in. And when you're licensed for 12 or 14, you can only have four children under the age of 18 months. So while there's a shortage for infants, that's where the shortage comes from, because we're only allowed to have 4 at a time. And every daycare has those same regulations. It might be different. It might be different in centers, but in home-based care, that's what the ratio is. We are on our way to being full, but we've been waiting on families who are pregnant to have their babies, and we've held those spaces for them. So we're busy. We are constantly receiving phone calls from people who are in need of care, and we try and always direct them to the Great Start to Quality, because you can go right to that website, greatstarttoquality.org, and you can push the link for parents, and that link will take you to another link that will say, if you're looking for childcare, you put in your zip code, and that zip code will give you a readout of daycares in your area and what their background is, how long they've been at it, if they have any openings, and a lot of other good information to give you a really good place to start.
That's really good advice, and we showed that graphic, greatstarttoquality.org, for the viewers that are watching. We'll show it again a bit later, why we keep you on. So since the pandemic, obviously a lot of daycares have gone out of business. They couldn't survive the COVID shutdowns. Parents, as you say, in your own experience, are scrambling to find daycare for their kids. Not just any daycare, right? A safe place for their kids. We have a couple of graphics here that kind of shows the fallout of daycares around the state. They call them these child care deserts. That's where, defined as where let's go back to that, 3 kids per one. Bob, we can go back. Yeah, where 3 children compete for every 1 available slot in a daycare. On to the next one. As we look in the graphic, 20 Michigan counties qualify as these deserts, and another 23 counties are close to qualifying. And the last one is that how many of them have gone out of business. I think we're 7% since February 2020, so we're talking a couple of years. Michigan has 637 fewer daycare providers, a 7% drop. So what caused all that? Was it simply the shutdown of COVID? They couldn't handle it? Or were they already sort of on the verge of, man, this is a tough business to be in business?
I think it's probably a combination of both, and probably for some, COVID just solidified that I'm out of this. But I also think it's because you could go, there were such people to fill jobs that you could leave daycare and go work at Costco and make more money and have less responsibility. So I think that was another thing that happened. A lot of people left daycare for that reason. I think also I think COVID made it hard for people to stay in daycare. We were closed ourselves, and we always knew we would go back to it, but we waited until we felt safe to go back to it. So I think there's a bunch of different reasons. Childcare is typically a low-paying job. I know even, directors. I had people that a company, I won't mention their names, but that I worked for, and the owner of it contacted me and asked me if I knew anyone who would be willing or able to fill a director's position. But it's because the pay is so low that a lot of people that I knew that I did contact said they had master's degrees, and they took other jobs in different fields because they could make more money doing that. So I think it's a combination of things.
Are you seeing parents, maybe a lot more parents, maybe two parents that have worked outside of the home, they're looking for daycare for their kids, but they've decided, you know what, the cost of putting my kid in daycare is too expensive. I'm going to stay home and watch the kiddos, and when they figure the budget, when you figure the cost of daycare with what they'd be me working outside the home, not a whole lot of money left over. Are you seeing more parents sort of making that choice? I'm staying home with the kids.
That's a good question. I haven't seen that. I've known some who have made that choice. I don't think in the area that I live in that I have seen a lot of people made that choice. I think I'm fortunate that I live in an area, I say that because it helps me to help more people. That's the fortunate part of it. But a lot of people that in the area that I live in have families that they rely on. They have grandparents that are retired that they rely on, and they're able to piecemeal their child care needs together. We only have one full-time family at our daycare. So I I'm sure that there are people who have said, it's not affordable for me to. I have two children, sending them to daycare. It isn't between my, transportation and whatever it's costing me to go to work, clothes-wise or whatever, and childcare, that they have decided to stay home. I think for some people that probably does make sense, but I haven't seen it in my daycare.
So I know in your case with you and your husband, you're running the show, so staffing is really not an issue for you because you're handling it. What about those
Right.
other ones, whether folks that work for a center, or in your case, if you're a private daycare owner and you might want to find an additional staff member, how do you go about doing that? What kind of possible solution? It's not simply just raising pay, right? There's more to recruiting people to this line of work.
Yes, I think first of all you have to have a kind of a calling for it. Working with children is it's hard work, it's rewarding work, it's challenging work, and there are requirements. If you work in a center, that you have to have certain requirements for your staff. If you are a director, you have to have a degree. If you have lead teachers, they have to either have a degree or have a CDA, which is a child development credential. And all of those things take time, and all those things deserve better pay. But typically, people move out of those jobs because they don't make much money. I know our local school ran into that problem, and they were putting it out on social media that they were looking for a director. And several people commented that that the pay for that job was so much lower, given that the person had to have a bachelor's degree in child development and experience, and the pay was that they were offering was between 35 and 40,000 a year, which seemed pretty low for the responsibility that came with the job. So I think that's a big part of the problem. I think that's why we're losing teachers, in all age groups.
Sure.
Whether it starts from preschool or infants or all the way up to high school, because we aren't paying new teachers a decent salary.
Right. Being an educator at any level is very hard, and so I get
Yes.
that. So I've got a segue here because I've talked about this. The governor has proposed providing universal pre-K, basically free preschool for 4-year-olds. So what do you make of that concept? And I know that that's something that I think President Biden talked about a year ago at a national level. It never took traction. So what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are what a great idea. On the other hand, how do we do it, and how do we make it work, and how do we implement that and make sure that the people who are teaching these 4-year-olds that they're qualified and that they're, because there's been talk in other states, and I don't expect Michigan to do this, but there have been talk in other states where there are shortages of lowering the requirements for teachers, and I don't think that that's necessarily the best way to go about it. I know that there's a shortage right now of educators, so my fear is, how do we get there? It's a great idea, but how do we get there? How do we train? I know that there was talk at one time of training people in their homes, that do daycare in their homes and funding those people. But again, that takes a lot of training if you aren't already qualified to do that. I have a bachelor's degree, so I would be able to do that. But there are already a lot of requirements on in-home childcare. We already have to take classes every year, and we already have to keep up on, our requirements. So implementing things, and I'm sure you know this too, Mike, implementing things is a lot different than talking about doing things.
Yeah, the government, and this is not a knock on our governor, because even at the national level, we've got these proposals, they still need to pass, and then of course there's the devil in the details, right? Yeah.
Exactly. And I love any program that's going to help kids, and I think that the free preschool program that is right now is a wonderful program too, but I would love to see it reach more kids. We know that children who have quality preschool at a young age, that it helps them throughout the rest of their education. It helps them throughout life. We know that. We know that study after study shows that early childhood teaching, preschool, Head Start, all of those programs are beneficial lifelong.
Yeah, and I've heard some daycare
Yeah.
owners have said when this first came out about universal pre-K for free 4-year-olds, they were saying, well, that might put me as the private daycare owner sort of out of business. I could see that other side of the coin, right?
I can see that other side of the coin too, and I that's always in the back of your mind, because throughout the year, we've been in this for 34 years, like I said, and we have had so many times when we're so busy, but we've also had a few times when we've worried about, are we going to be able to stay in this? Are we going to be able to sustain this? So that's always in the back of your mind, and I can understand that as being a concern too, because if it goes into the public school, then what happens to those of us who are going to lose those 4-year-olds from our programs? So I would love it if they would somehow include, but again, if they would include people who do daycare in their homes, then that calls for a lot of training. So
I think last year about this time, speaking of programs, we did talk about something that I think it's called the Tri-Share program. They have these Tri-Share facilitator hubs, and that's where I think the governor launched that last year, where the cost of the child daycare is shared 3 ways: by the employee, the employer, and then of course the state would kick in. I haven't heard much about that. I don't know if that ever had traction.
I haven't either, and I think what happened with that is that a lot of businesses that had initially thought it was a great idea, I don't know that they had the interest in it. I've noticed that several companies that at one time were doing on-site childcare. I think the only one I can think of anymore that does that is Covenant, and I'm not sure if Saginaw Valley. I'm not sure if they even they had a daycare too, but I'm not sure that they stopped doing that or if they continue to have a daycare there.
Well, to me, if you're sort of in retail, restaurant business, if you got single moms looking for daycare, I'm kind of, and I don't hold the purse strings of a company's budget, because it'd have to come out of them a little bit. Boy, I just think that could be a gold mine for some companies. as a way to attract folks to that kind of business, saying, wow, I can bring my child and I can see my child during lunch and they're right there.
And we're, we'll fund some of it, and this will fund some of it, and the government will fund some of it. So that's a savings for everyone, and it's a win-win. I don't know, like you said, I don't know what happened with that program, but it didn't seem to take flight.
Yeah. So you've been at this for 34 years, and I asked you this before we came on the air. You obviously have a calling for it, you and your husband. It's amazing. How much longer do you want to do that?
Well, we are not, we're about 5 years away from retirement. People ask me that all the time, and I say I love my work. I don't know. I don't know exactly how much longer, but I know at least 4 or 5 more years, at least that. And it is calling, and I would miss it. And I missed the kids when we were closed during COVID. I missed the kids desperately. I crave. I'm one of those people that craves routine. So for me, not having those, things to do every day, we've helped raise kids. We get them when they're babies,
Sure.
and they stay until 10, 11 years old. So, I have kids now that I watch their parents, so that's a nice thing. It's very rewarding.
Right.
So,
And you've been,
yeah.
obviously, you're a mentor to young parents. You're doing a good job with that and raising their kids. And obviously, you're a great mentor for folks that want to get into this business or current daycare owners. I'm sure you're having lots of conversations with people that are
I
sort
would
of.
love to help you. Yes, anyone who would like to. I have a neighbor who's thinking about it. I'm trying to help her. So, there's plenty to go around.
Yeah. And we put that graphic up again, and I'll close it with that. The greatstarttoquality.org is a good place to do it. Connie, kudos to you and your husband.
Thank you.
You're excellent at taking care of kids and families, and you provided some really good advice. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me, Mike.
You bet. And that's our show for tonight, but be sure to join us again next Tuesday night for the follow-up. Are we making any progress on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion? What more needs to be done to have it truly ingrained into our companies, our college campuses, and our culture overall? That's next week right here at 8 o'clock on the follow-up. In the meantime, hit me up on social media or dial into our follow-up hotline to voice your opinion. We'd really like to hear from you. Thanks for joining us tonight. Have a great night. We'll see you next week.